Christianity is coming back into public schools, and we need to talk about it. All right, our next state is Texas, and we have two problematic bills presented in the Senate in February 2025. And surprise, surprise, they are sponsored by all 20 Republicans in the Texas Senate. Now, why does that matter? Because Republicans hold an almost 65% majority in the Texas Senate and almost 59% majority in the House. So, if Republicans unanimously support these bills, then it's very probably that they will pass just due to simple majority vote. So while the aforementioned 2021 bill about prayer and Bible reading in public schools didn't pass, these bills probably will, especially in light of the recent election. I just looked into this 5 minutes ago, and between the time that I wrote the script and I'm filming, both of these bills passed the Senate. Okay, so they are 50% of the way to becoming law. After the Senate, they have to move to the House. Like I said, it was very probable that they would pass due to a simple majority. And actually, I'm going to look into how many voted. Let's see. So for one bill, we had read for the third time voted. 23 people said yes, no 7, and there was 1 absent. And then for the other bill, now this one had a bigger no vote. So it was only 20 yeses and 11 no's. But I mean, both of them passed the Senate. So craziness, guys. Craziness. These are halfway there to becoming law. And if they already passed the Senate, I mean, like I said, there's a majority in the House as well. So it's very likely that these will become law. So what are they? We've talked about all this, but we haven't talked about what they are. So for the first one, Senate Bill 11, it is essentially a resurrection of the rejected 2021 bill that I said had to do with prayer and Bible reading. Sadly, it is back, and it has come back with a vengeance. Now, specifically, this bill calls for a period of prayer and Bible reading, or guys, don't freak out yet, or it could be a reading of another religious text. Whew, phew. Not really. The bill also states that there are the same requirements for permission slips and signing away any right to object based on the Establishment Clause. So we're back to that, signing away our rights to say, hey, this isn't constitutional. The bill also would require the Bible reading and prayer to occur before school or only in classrooms where everybody has signed the permission slips. Again, that's similar to the bill that was previously rejected. It's just the same thing, different year, and this time it is being passed. Okay. The biggest change that I see between the previous bill that was not passed and the current one that is 50% of the way to being passed is the addition of the statement, other religious texts. Okay. Now, of course, while it is being done in an attempt to be inclusive, let's be honest. We're talking about Texas here. Texas is the third most religious state in the country, with the largest religious group in each county being some flavor of Christianity, usually Catholic or Southern Baptist. So given the option, what will teachers, superintendents, principals initiate? Bible readings. Even if there were a possibility for, readings of the Quran or selections from the Satanic Temple Library, I highly doubt that, 1, many teachers would support that, and that 2, many parents would sign permission slips for their kids to go and participate. Now, the language here is very important as well, because it says, shall adopt a policy requiring every campus to provide a period of prayer and reading of the Bible or other religious text. Okay, first, let's talk about the word requiring. While the district or school system may vote, once that decision is made, all campuses and schools are required to partake. The second word I want to highlight here is a period. Not multiple periods for different religious groups and different religious text readings. No, 1 period. And it has to be at a certain time when only those with permission slips can join. And of course, not be heard by others. So we're talking about exclusivity here. Dare I say segregation by religious belief? The other phrase is Bible or other religious text. Again, the same thing here. Not and or, just or. It is either one or the other. It is either Bible or another religious text. And again, if it's just one period for just one religious text, which text is a mostly Christian area, a mostly Christian state going to choose? The Bible, obviously. And on top of all of these glaring issues, we haven't talked about the most important problem with this. The fact that this is unconstitutional to begin with. Okay, this bill is halfway on its way to introducing religion in schools again. This is not a student-initiated club. This is not students saying, oh, I want to read the Bible with my peers after class and we don't have a space to do this. This is not it. Guys, this is the school board making these decisions for public schools, for the entire district that they're in charge of. Like, this is 100% not okay. And of course, the bill has a note about the school's loudspeaker system to comply with the Santa Fe versus Doe Supreme Court ruling that we talked about. You can't use government funds. But even authorizing staff-led religious meetings or approving required religious text readings in school is using school resources, okay? You're using the teachers, you're using the space, you're using the time. I mean, who's going to organize all this stuff? Who's going to print out the papers and send all these permission slips to parents? Or maybe it's online now, I guess. But I mean, who's taking the time to organize this, create this? This is time and resources paid by who? The government, because it's a public school. It's a fucking public school. These are government funds, guys. Ugh. And it's being used to promote a specific religion. And the addition of other religious texts is, in my opinion, just to sound inclusive, because what district would approve religious text readings that aren't from the Bible in a state like Texas? It's crazy. This is unconstitutional, 100% unconstitutional. And honestly, it needs to be addressed. All right, the second bill in Texas that is, again, halfway to being passed. It's depressing. It was also introduced in February 2025, and it is Senate Bill 10. This one says that public elementary and secondary schools shall display in a conspicuous place in each classroom a copy of the Ten Commandments. I had some hope that this bill wasn't going to pass because of all the details we're going to get into, but I can't believe it is. So the copy of the Ten Commandments that must be displayed in a conspicuous place. You can't hide it behind your desk and hope nobody sees it. It has to be in a conspicuous place. It also must be legible so that anyone in any area of the classroom can read it. It also needs to be at least 16 by 20 inches. That's, 16 by 20-ish? I don't know. And it also must present the Ten Commandments in the version listed in the bill, which I assume is a New King James Version, since it uses thou, but don't quote me on that. Now, if a classroom doesn't have a copy, it must accept a privately donated copy. This is obligatory. It must. This is insane. It may also purchase one using, guess what? School funds. What the actual fuck, guys? School funds. I thought that the Establishment Clause was being interpreted in a way that made it clear that you can't use government funds to support a certain religion or non-religion. But here we are. If you don't have a copy, you can either accept a donated copy or use school funds to pay for it. The other issue here, besides the obviously unconstitutionality of it, is that Texas school districts are already struggling with a lack of funding and struggling majorly. Okay, look at these headlines. Need I go on? I don't think so. And this bill would approve public school funds going towards a fucking Ten Commandments poster for every single classroom in the state. Insane. Now, I know a poster wouldn't cost that much, but actually, you know what? Let's look up exactly how much it would cost. Okay, I take that back. A 16 by 20 inch unframed poster can cost around $20 to $30. That's a bit more than I expected. I was thinking like $5. Here are some examples that I found. And the options are pretty limited because you have to make sure that the text is legible so that people can read it when they're standing anywhere in the room. So you have just a few options and they are a bit expensive. Now, all of these examples that I'm showing you are unframed. Just imagine how much the cost would skyrocket if you chose to pick a framed copy. Okay, now a copy in each classroom. So it's $20 to $30 for each poster. We're putting them in each classroom. Let's look up how many classrooms are in Texas. So let's Google. How many classrooms in a standard Texas public school? Okay, so AI tells me that there is an average of 39 classrooms for a middle school. So let's just go with that. And how many schools in Texas? Again, it says about 8,000. So let's do some simple math. 8,000 schools multiplied by 39 classrooms, and we get about 312,000 different classrooms in the whole state. Now multiply 312,000 by, let's be nice and say about $20, and you get $6.24 million. $6.24 million for a stupid effing poster. This bill, which again is halfway to becoming law, would approve government funding of over $6 million to go towards posters that promote Christian ideas and Christian fundamentals. Insane. And this is during a time when Texas public schools have a severe funding deficit. So I could think of about a dozen different things that we could be spending this money on instead of stupid posters. Let's say, I don't know, new materials, new laptops, STEM classes, ESL classes, free breakfast, or crazy idea, maybe paying teachers better. I know it's crazy, and I just want to point out that for many Christian educators, having Christ in any capacity in the classroom would be a priority. We are sons and daughters of the Most High King before we are anything else, before we are teachers, before we are parents, before we are just general citizens. So the laws of God always are higher and more important than the laws of humans. And one of the major commandments is to go and make disciples. So if there was a way to bring Christ in the classroom, especially a legal way, I would have been 100% for this. So if I were still a Christian teaching in Texas, I would be overjoyed at this bill. Finally, a way to bring Christ into the classroom, and on top of that, it's legal. And I would even go to the extent of using my own money and my own funds to buy posters for my classrooms and the classrooms of my fellow teachers. Like, that is how much I would have supported this as a Christian. I would be overjoyed because this would be a way that is legal, albeit unconstitutional, but that's besides the point. It would be a legal way to bring my faith into the classroom because the ultimate goal is to bring God glory, right? The ultimate goal is to show Christ in everything that we do. So what better way to have a poster of the 10 Commandments and, point it out sometimes and, hey, remember this? And I would 100% be on board with that. And speaking as an ex-Christian, I assume that there are many other educators in Texas that are also overjoyed that this is happening and would probably even go the same distance of using their own funds to purchase a poster. And of course, this bill ends with a clause saying that no public elementary or secondary school is exempt. So all schools in Texas, if this bill is passed, must include a poster of the 10 Commandments in the classroom. Insanity. Now, on top of these two bills that are on their way to becoming law, we have a very sketchy, dare I say, borderline insane curriculum that was just adopted in the state. This follows the passing of the Texas House Bill 1605 in 2023, which asked the Texas Education Agency to create state-owned textbooks. And they developed essentially what are Christian-esque textbooks, right? And I'm going to give you a brief overview of how this curriculum integrates Christianity into virtually everything. Now, I can't get into all the details, so we're just going to look at one grade level, but I am going to create a different video going into the details of how this curriculum essentially promotes Christian nationalism. So that is your friendly reminder to like and subscribe so you can catch that video when it drops. But for now, let's look at the 5th grade language arts curriculum, which as far as I can see includes some history and social studies elements. There are 10 units, and guess how many include some mention of Christianity, the Bible, or God? 8. Yep, 8 out of 10. Crazy. All right, so it all starts in Unit 2, which is supposed to cover the art and culture of the Renaissance. However, it reads more like a section devoted to explaining how Christianity drove the Renaissance. Again, this is just a quick look, but there are 32 mentions of Christian or Christianity in the teacher's guide compared to just 4 mentions of Islam, which I think that is just a slap in the face to the massive influence that Islam had on the Renaissance. Now, did religion affect the Renaissance? Absolutely, of course. But so did other factors, which is severely overlooked in this curriculum. Take a look at this page. It says, people thought a lot about the path to heaven. Not an afterlife, heaven, which is a particularly Christian idea. It goes on to say, art was created to honor God or to communicate stories from the Christian Bible, which was important because few people were able to read during this time. Now, let's ignore the poor punctuation in this section, which I think is absolutely unforgivable for a state-owned textbook. But I digress. It says, art was created to honor God. That is utterly misleading because who were the people that actually had enough money to commission these artists? The church and very wealthy, often religious people. And interestingly, they wanted to influence others to believe in God, right? So it wasn't created to honor God, but more as a way to influence others. And I assume that if other people had enough money to commission the artists, they would have also done so, perhaps creating non-religious pieces, but that wasn't the case because the church had the most money at the time. Now, of course, the communication part is spot on because people did want to communicate stories about the Bible, but this curriculum is completely jumping over the why behind it. And that why would be the power and control of the church. They wanted to expand the control and influence more people, but the curriculum doesn't touch on that. So again, this whole sentence is completely misleading. Also, what about the mythological Catholic art pieces? I mean, if we're going to talk about religion and the Renaissance, can we talk about these pieces? They're wonderfully macabre and interesting and creepy, and I love them. But if we're going to talk about religion and religion's influence on the Renaissance, why not include these? Oh wait, I forgot, it doesn't fit the picture perfect Christian narrative, so of course we're not going to include them. So overall, using a simple statement like this is not only misleading, but it is essentially a lie by omission. It overlooks so much history that it's quite frankly a bit offensive, and a lot of the curriculum is just like this. Here's another example from Leonardo da Vinci's The Last Supper. Obviously, this is a classic depicting a story from the Bible, of course, but the curriculum goes way too in-depth into Christianity and elements from the Bible when explaining an art piece, and especially in a curriculum for a 5th grade language arts course. Again, I have to emphasize this, that it is a language arts curriculum. This isn't an art class. This isn't a religion class. This is language arts. Okay. So the curriculum says, to understand the painting, we must understand the Christian Bible story. I mean, you could understand it in one sentence, really. But the curriculum goes into detail about the Passover and the importance of communion, 2 things that I think are utterly not irrelevant to the painting because, I mean, the idea of communion comes from the Last Supper. Why were they having the Last Supper? Because of the Passover. I mean, it's obviously connected, but you don't need to understand the Jewish tradition of Passover and the now Christian tradition of communion to understand this painting. Simple. And the curriculum even includes a quote from the Bible and has a note to the teacher about the Hebrew Bible and the Old and New Testaments. Again, things that you don't need to get into to look at a painting, especially when you're reading content for a language arts curriculum. I think we could have limited this section to include just a few sentences talking about how Da Vinci worked to recreate a story from the Bible about when Jesus told his disciples that one of them would eventually betray him. And then you could go on to talk about how he rendered the different faces, the different reactions, the materials he used to create it. I don't know. That's That's it. You can use just one sentence to explain the painting and move on. There is absolutely no need to include quotes from the Bible, an explanation of the Passover, or even vocabulary words like there are in here, like disciples and covenant. What the fuck? You don't need that, okay? You simply don't need it. It's unnecessary. Now let's look briefly at Unit 5, Poetry. I honestly almost didn't even open up this section because I thought there couldn't possibly be mention of Christianity and God in a section on poetry. But boy, was I wrong, okay? This section teaches Psalms 23. Psalms 23, and if you don't know, it is the psalm that goes, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside still waters," etc. The teacher's guide also tells teachers to review the author's biography. So who is the author? Supposedly King David. And it tells teachers to discuss who King David was, mentioning stories like David and Goliath and King Saul. Again, going a little bit over the top and talking about Bible stories in the classroom in a section on poetry. Okay. Here are some questions and expected answers that the teacher's guide also includes. After line 1, ask students, which point of view does the psalmist use in the psalm? The answer would be the psalmist writes in the first person, he is the sheep, and the Lord is his shepherd. Explain that David is speaking to the Lord. This term can be defined as one having authority or power over another. David believes his God is Lord. So we're teaching students that God is Lord. Interesting. I mean, not directly, but we're looking at a passage and emphasizing David's beliefs. And that is subtle indoctrination, if you ask me. Okay. After line 2, the teacher's guide says to ask students, what rich and vivid language does David use to continue the metaphor from line 1? The answer is David uses words like lie down in green pastures and leadeth me beside the still waters to illustrate that the Lord provides nourishment for him. So again, here we're subtly teaching students that the Lord provides nourishment for people. Moving on, another question says, explain that a rod and staff are used to protect and guide sheep. How does this imagery show how David feels about his God? Pause for responses. Call students' attention to the imagery in line 4, Valley of the Shadow of Death. Explain to students that David is using this phrase to describe that even in the worst of times, he fears no evil because of the trust he has in his Lord. And so here we're teaching kids that you don't need to fear because you can trust in God. Again, this isn't overt, obvious teaching that kids, you have to believe this, but it is going way too far and it is implanting these ideas in public school students. Does this sound like non-biased teaching using religious elements to support a secular curriculum? No. And that's the argument that a lot of people have been saying, that it is constitutional to include mentions of Christianity if it is a non-biased teaching or if it's just in support of a secular curriculum. But does this sound non-biased to you? Absolutely not. And another question, is this what 5th graders should actually be learning in a language arts class? Again, absolutely not. This type of subtle indoctrination continues throughout the units, culminating in a novel study. And guess which novel they chose? Out of all the wonderful, incredible novels that they could have chosen for a 5th grade language arts curriculum, guess which one they chose? A biblical allegory. And of course, I'm talking about The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe from the Chronicles of Narnia. Now listen, I am not against the series. I am not against novels including religious elements. I'm not against biblical allegories by any stretch of the imagination. I actually really enjoyed the Chronicles of Narnia when I read them. What I am against is teaching these books in a public school setting, especially as the one and only novel study. This isn't a part of a study on allegories. This isn't a part on a study of religious influences on novels. This is a single book used in the unit on the novel study. And it is specifically religious. That is what I'm against, okay? C.S. Lewis is great. I have nothing against his work. So I 100% believe that they chose this novel to subtly indoctrinate the students into Christianity without being too obvious. And I say that because I did the same thing as a teacher, unfortunately. When I worked as a missionary, I had several ESL classes and I chose a book to supplement learning and introduce new vocabulary. And guess which book I chose? Not The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, but it was the first book in the series, which is The Magician's Nephew. And I specifically chose it because I thought that it was a nice way to include religious topics in a way that my students would be more open to receiving. Now, The Magician's Nephew wasn't as overtly religious as The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, but I chose it with a purpose, and that purpose was to open the floor to conversation about religion, to bring it into the classroom without being a horrible Bible thumper, as they call them. But I did it with a purpose. I specifically chose that book with a purpose, and that purpose was to spread Christianity. Of course, in a more acceptable way in a secular environment. So you cannot tell me that the people who created this curriculum did not do the same. I 100% believe that they specifically chose this novel to implement Christianity in public schools. Okay? I see no other reason to include it, to be honest. I mean, with so many better novels the state could have chosen for this curriculum. Other novels that are, I don't know, maybe not biblical allegories, right? But the worst part is that the state is paying the schools to incorporate this curriculum. Yes, you heard that correctly. The state of Texas is offering financial incentives to schools that include this Christian-infused curriculum. So instead of forcing this curriculum on schools and saying you must teach it, you must teach this curriculum with obvious Christian elements, the Texas Education Agency is offering financial incentives and perks for schools that choose to adapt it. Specifically, they are offering $40 per student annually, plus another $20 per student for printing costs. Why is it $40 per student annually? Don't ask me. I have no idea. But I should think that this should all be a one-time cost, right? But they are offering $40 per student each year for every school that chooses to implement this. Remember how much putting up just one poster in each classroom would cost? $6.24 million. Remember that? Okay, we are looking at a much bigger sum here. There are about 2.1 million students enrolled in K-5 classes in Texas, which is who would use this language arts curriculum. So multiply 2.1 million by the $40 annual incentive, and we have $84 million annually. Now add on top of that another $42 million for printing costs, because the $20 multiplied by 2.1 million, that's a one-time cost, $42 million for printing costs. Are you kidding me? That is over $100 million in potential incentives to include a Christian curriculum in public schools. And again, this is happening when public schools in Texas are already facing budget cuts and deficits. And because of that, I think this is honestly disgusting, because I feel like the state is taking advantage of the fact that schools need funds so badly that they're saying, okay, well, here are the funds that you need. You just have to incorporate this Christian-infused curriculum. You want to buy those new textbooks? You want to buy new laptops? You want to pay your teachers a living wage? Well, just teach them this curriculum about Christianity, and you'll have your funds. You'll have $40 per student annually if you include this curriculum, right? That's disgusting. That's taking advantage of schools that are struggling to get by. It's insanity, guys. This video looks at one state's legislation regarding education and religion. If you want to watch the whole video about how Christianity is coming back into public schools, check out the link in the description below.